This would be 6, right? Number 6. I'm looking. Yeah, we're looking around, make sure we get this right. We don't want to mess up our big debut here.
Well, we'd like to welcome Douglas Edward Ulman to the stage. See, thought I forgot your middle name. It's up here. So, interesting fact. First of all, welcome to the Summits podcast. Thank you for making time out of your busy schedule for this.
Thanks for having me.
Little known fact, we met 20 years ago last month. I think you were like 5 and I was 10, but that's when we first met each other down in Austin, Texas. That kind of dates us a little bit.
20 years. Wow. That's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
That is.
We look the same.
And now we live a lot closer.
This is true. So what we'd like to kind of start with here is educate our listeners and viewers on who Doug Ulman is in the early years, the young pup.
Wow.
Or younger pup.
Early years. That's a good question. So I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up between Baltimore and Washington, in a family that, amazing parents and older brother, and, just a typical middle class sort of upbringing, playing sports and going to school and watching my parents sort of be real involved in the community as volunteers predominantly, whether it be the schools or the library or organizations they cared about. But I sort of look back on it as real traditional upbringing that was predominantly focused on sports, to be honest.
Right.
Playing soccer and basketball and whatever else was sort of in season.
Did sports keep you out of trouble, or were you still a troublemaker growing up?
That's a great one. Sports maybe caused some trouble in some ways. No,
I see that.
I was lucky to be surrounded by great teammates and coaches, and and I always say this, but I played soccer and predominantly, but my parents learned soccer when I learned soccer because they didn't really know the game, and so there was like no pressure. Sort of like, hey, let's just learn this game. And, but yeah, some of the best, most lasting friendships to this day are teammates from growing up, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I know soccer, as we'll get into, has been a big part of your life. I think we got a photo here showing you practicing your early skills. And I have a question though about the photo itself. Pop that
pull it up
here
for you here real quick.
There's 2 items of note with this photo. Number 1 is the quote on there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a quote that I heard hundreds of times over the years from my high school soccer coach, Bill Stera. And when you're in high school, you hear it, it goes one in one ear out the other, and you don't really appreciate it. But the premise of the quote is that in soccer, there's no timeouts, right? So you're constantly moving, the ball's constantly moving, and you have to find time to walk to get your rest so that you're ready when the ball's there or you're running, sprinting, whatever. And so it makes total sense. But, again, you don't appreciate it at the time when you're 15, 16, 17 years old. But later in life, I've come to really appreciate sort of the more significant meaning behind it.
Yeah. And I see you're rocking the same haircut as you did back then.
It comes and goes.
Not that I should make any comments about hairstyles.
Once you pick a winner, you just stick with it. I mean,
fair enough. There have been some in-between stages, but you sort of revert back as you get older.
Did you ever go with the Euro soccer mullet?
So I had
that means
a few
yes.
years after that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
A few years after that picture was taken, I didn't have a mullet, but I did have sort of a mop. I mean, I had long curly fro, and it just got a little out of control for a while. But that's why I had to revert back.
I want to see one of those photos.
I can dig one. I can try to do one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So high school soccer player, and then on up into what led to the next step for you. If you want to expand a little bit on your collegiate career.
Yeah. So, when I was a senior in high school, I'll never forget this. My parents we were talking about like where I should go to school, and obviously I wanted to play soccer, and there were some good options. There were lots of options, but it was hard to figure out what to do. And I'll never forget my parents saying, you should go to the place where if you never play soccer again, you're going to be happy. And at the time, again, at 17, I was like, I don't really understand what they mean. And so I basically ended up going to the best academic school I could go to. And soccer helped get me there, which, was fortunate. And lo and behold, a year later, right before my sophomore year, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I looked back on that conversation and said, of all the places I could have been, I probably was in the best possible place, sort of from the university standpoint, and surrounded by, again, great friends and teammates and coaches. And but at 17, I didn't really understand what my parents meant. And so I sort of owe them a ton of gratitude for helping channel my decision in that way.
Yeah, so that's a great segue with, May being Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month, and then I believe June is Sarcoma and Bone Cancer Awareness Month. Kind of a natural tie-in. So I guess the question is, Doug Ulman, what is your cancer story?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good reminder. I can celebrate during multiple months, I guess. Lucky me. I was diagnosed in August of 1996 with a very rare type of sarcoma called chondrosarcoma. And it was really a fluke. I mean, I didn't have any symptoms, was really fit and healthy and getting ready to go back to play my sophomore season soccer in college, and ended up in the emergency room through a series of events that, again, were unrelated. And lo and behold, in the emergency room, they said, let's do a chest x-ray just to be sure you're okay. And it was sort of an asthmatic event that led me to the emergency room. And they did the chest x-ray and actually at the time said it looked fine. And the next day, another doctor looked at it and said, no, you've got to have a CT scan immediately. And he thought there was something wrong with my heart. And it turned out that there was a tumor growing behind my heart in my rib cage. And so on the one hand, I was really fortunate to find it at that point. On the other hand, there was just a huge psychological disconnect because I was so fit, and yet they were telling me, oh, you have cancer. And so it just didn't make sense. And at 19, a lot of stuff like this doesn't make sense. But I remember just being confused and frustrated and sort of trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. Our episode 1 guest had a similar situation, played football, and went to the doctor's office for a totally unrelated type symptom that led to him finding out that he had cancer at that time. So it's amazing how some of these things can go unchecked and then just hit you.
Yeah. And it was so surprising to the doctors that they actually told me in August, they said, look, we know how important soccer is. Why don't you go back and play this season and then come back in December at winter break and we'll have the tumor removed. And, when you first hear that, you're like, oh, that sounds like a great thing. And then I thought to myself, how could I possibly know that there's this tumor inside me and just go about my normal day and pretend that it wasn't there. So I decided to not do that. But I remember they were like, oh, don't worry about it. And I thought, you would regret that for the rest of your life if for some reason it grew or spread or something happened during that interim period. But so again, I do feel very fortunate that it was caught early. But at the time I didn't feel so fortunate.
Yeah. And then did you stay enrolled in school and do all your treatments and any surgery there on site versus coming back to the Baltimore area?
I was diagnosed in Baltimore, and so did all of it there. But then I ended up going back to school. I was really lucky. Southwest Airlines had just started flying between Baltimore and Providence, Rhode Island. And my freshman year, I would take the train, which was like an 8-hour train ride. It was fine. It was great.
Pre-Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's funny you say, I used to take the overnight train. I used to sleep the whole time, or try to sleep the whole time.
Yeah.
But when Southwest started flying, it was a 40-minute flight, and it was like $49. And so I could get back and forth a lot easier, which was really nice. And so I was able to stay in school. And that was another thing that my parents really pushed. They were like, look, you can stay home this fall, but all your friends are going to be going back to school. There won't be anybody around here, and you're going to be really lonely. And they said, go back to school, and who cares what your grades are? Who cares? Like, at least you'll be around your teammates and your friends. And they were right. I mean, it was a great decision at the time.
Yeah. Perfect. I would agree. I mean, so did the grades suffer, or did you keep those up?
I have no idea, to be honest. I don't remember. I know I was very hard to be around for a while. Like my roommate, who's still one of my closest friends to this day, I don't know how he did it. I mean, I went on this like health kick. Like I wouldn't eat anything that was unhealthy. I didn't want to go anywhere where people were like smoking. Like I was just like went into this like hunker down. I was like listening to meditation tapes before meditation was cool and mainstream, and and I don't know how he put up with me that year, but I don't remember studying a whole lot, to be honest. But it turned out okay. I did have a nightmare once that I didn't graduate, and I have found my diploma, so I know that it happened.
Yeah, I think you're good.
I still have those nightmares, so
well,
yeah.
I'm sure it was kind of I will say awkward is probably the best way to describe it. Your friends around you, how they should act and feel around you, and then vice versa. You're going through, what you're dealing with and how you react to that. We all know that everyone tends to react a little bit differently based on their diagnosis and their situation. So I can imagine that was awkward is really the only word I can describe it with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, everybody means well, and everybody's like wanting to help in any possible way, but people don't know what to do and don't know what to say. And, again, it's so foreign for people in college to think about. I still have friends to this day who like their image of me is the guy who had cancer, right? The kid who had cancer in college. And again, I don't fault people for that at all. But I think people are just ill-equipped to handle it at that age. And so some people drift closer, some people drift further, and you sort of go through the journey and sort of friendships and relationships evolve, I think.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. So how long did that process take, and then when were you deemed clear?
So I was deemed clear of the sarcoma pretty early. I mean, maybe 6 months after the diagnosis. It was so rare and slow growing that they felt like if it ever was to sort of come back, we would catch it again. And so it was pretty clear, like after a few months, that and surgeries and stuff, that there would be scans and follow up. But then I was diagnosed with melanoma. So in March of 1997, and then again in June of 97. So all within a year, really within 10 months. And again, I was lucky because the melanomas most likely would never have been caught if I hadn't had sarcoma, if I hadn't been going to the doctor. I mean, they were doing, I had a colonoscopy, I had like everything done in the world at that time. And so again, fortunate that they were being so thorough with everything at the time at Johns Hopkins. And so, very, very lucky.
Any setbacks to the soccer career at Brown with the melanoma diagnosis at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, March of 97, I was walking to soccer, or I was getting ready to go to soccer practice. I was in my dorm room, spring practice, when the doctor called. And I'll never forget that. It was sort of a weird call out of the blue. And there was a lot of setbacks. I mean, the biggest setbacks were really psychologically, because over time, soccer just wasn't as important anymore. And the camaraderie and the team aspect was, but it was just hard to concentrate. It was hard to like put the same level of intensity into it that I had up to that point.
Yeah. So how much more school did you have left, or how many more years of school did you have left at that point?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed with melanoma in the spring of 97, I was finishing my sophomore year. So I had 2 more years. And I still played and stayed on the team, but it wasn't the same. It didn't carry the same weight and intensity. And but I still loved it and enjoyed the experience.
So you're class of 99, is that right?
Class of 99.
99, okay. So 99 comes, it's May, it's graduation, then what?
Yeah, so during my time at Brown, I actually had started a nonprofit focused on young adults with cancer, and I had no idea what I was doing. Started in my dorm room, was totally naive, other than I knew there were other people out there that had been through a certain similar experience, and I couldn't find those people. I couldn't connect with them. This was like the early days of the internet, so it wasn't as easy as it is today. But every time I would share my story, somebody else would say, "Oh, my sister was diagnosed in high school," or "my cousin," so I knew there was this community of people. And so I decided to start this organization, and again, had no idea what I was doing. But I had applied for a grant from an organization in New York called Echoing Green, and they fund social entrepreneurs. And so when I graduated, they actually provided me a grant that paid my salary, paid $30,000 a year to keep building the organization. So their whole goal was, we're going to give people the salary so that they can go out and like have the runway to sort of go create something. And so that's what happened. And so I was lucky. I actually moved back home and was running the organization. Had been doing it as a volunteer, and then had this sort of stipend support for the year after graduation.
Sure. So yeah. I know the answer already to this, but what was the real driver? What really pushed you to say, you know what, I want to do something about my situation beyond just, surviving, obviously priority number one, but what pushed you to start something, to make a cause out of it?
I part of it was that I just had grown up in this family that was very involved in the community, and had sort of instilled this idea that if you saw a gap or a void or something that didn't exist, that you should go after it, and fill it, if you had the capacity to do so. So I think some of it came from that, and then some of it just came from like probably just wanting to put my attention on something positive and just refocus and stop worrying about my own situation or dwelling on it. And there was such a sort of cathartic aspect that I didn't expect, but that came from sort of networking with other survivors and sort of focusing on their journeys and trying to help other people.
Yeah. And it's another way to channel that competitiveness, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was fun. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was learning a lot. Yeah, I mean, I like to create things, so I didn't realize that maybe at the time, but it was fun to create something.
Yeah, I concur 100%. All right, so let's go forward from there. The next couple of years were interesting.
Yeah, so I had a chance to move to Austin, Texas in 2001, early 2001, to work at an organization that was then called the Lance Armstrong Foundation. And Lance and I had connected several years earlier by email, and had developed sort of an email, correspondence every few weeks over actually 3 years. And then he asked if I would come down and help the organization he had founded. At the time had 3 or 4 employees, and was raising a bunch of money, but didn't know what to do with the money. Wasn't sure how to program sort of to help as many people as possible. So for me, I was young and, excited, and it was an awesome opportunity where I didn't have to focus on fundraising. I could focus on trying to figure out what to do with the money, to help people, which at the time was awesome. So I moved to Austin and ended up staying there 14 years, and ended up, living through the tremendous highs and tremendous lows of that journey. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I learned a lot. And as you might imagine, there were some great days, and there were some challenging days, to be sure. But at the end of the day, and you referenced this earlier, the best part about it was meeting incredible people from all over the world who had a shared. Yeah, I mean, I guess Indianapolis is part of the world, so yeah, from all over the world.
Got us there.
Just kidding, but truly, people that were bonded by a common, passion or experience, and who wanted to do something great. And I think that's that was inspiring. And to this day, I mean, so many friendships that have lasted 10, 20 years, were formed, which is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I there's a lot of things I don't remember. I mean, even as recent as last week, as you can attest to.
Yep.
But I do remember meeting you and another person down there the first time we went down to the Ride for the Roses back in April of I guess it was 2001. As crazy as that sounds, that was a cool experience. Very cool. Yeah. All right, so you mentioned Indy. I have to throw this out there. You were still at Livestrong at the time, but you graced us with your presence at An Evening with Heroes, the Heroes Foundation's gala in 2015, and you brought or came along and hooked us up with your good buddy Stu Scott, which is probably one of my all-time favorite gala photos here. We'll pull up. It's had a relatively recent post on Stu's anniversary of his passing here. That was a good night. I appreciate you making that connection, but then also for coming up to the event itself and sharing some words of wisdom with the folks there.
That was awesome. I'll never forget it. I mean, we've got some great photos. The one that you have there on the screen, and I reminisce about that a lot. Actually, it was. Thanks for having me. It was phenomenal.
Heather in the background here saying I could have used some powder on my forehead and nose at the time for that photo too. But
you were the star that night, and you were shining. You were shining.
Wow,
That's a good recovery.
I owe you for that one. I'll have to tag that aspect.
Heather's not so nice about phrasing it that way as you were.
Hey,
so
you're shining. You're shining.
Just a guest. Just a guest.
Right. So that was in 2015, and then not too long after that, you made your way to the Midwest.
Yeah, so we relocated to Columbus, Ohio, which frankly was not part of our plan, but the opportunity to come to a community that had started something in Pelotonia that was just phenomenal and had achieved such success in a very short period of time. And I had always been intrigued. I had actually come to Columbus for the first Pelotonia event. And so I had seen it firsthand, and I was sort of wondering, like, how is this happening? How are they raising millions of dollars? How did they build this so quickly? And so I was curious about it. And when the opportunity came to learn more about it and learn about Columbus in general and the philanthropic environment and the generosity of the community, it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Yeah, I remember hearing about the move, and I was like, holy crap, he left Livestrong. Oh, wait, he's only 3 hours away now. But
it's been great.
It wasn't too long. It wasn't too long after that, though, that I started seeing the Ohio State University references, and I'm like, okay, this is going cool. South quick.
Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing. I mean, the Midwest, I'd never had any experience really living in the Midwest, and people are so kind. Like, the collaborative spirit and the welcoming nature, it's been awesome. It's been a great place to raise our kids. We obviously missed friends in Austin and family, but it's been a great opportunity, not just within Pelotonia, which has been phenomenal, but also just beyond, and getting to meet some amazing people.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the kind Midwest words.
Yep.
We seem to think so too. We call it Hoosier hospitality, but you're not that far away.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
So I guess I have a question for you then. When the College Cup last week, did you happen to watch any of that and any backing of the Indiana Hoosiers?
So I did not watch live. I saw some of the highlights.
Okay.
My college coach from Brown actually coaches at Clemson.
Okay.
And Clemson has been, since he's been there, I don't know. I mean, they've been like in the top 5 every year since he's been there, but they have yet to win the national championship. And so they lost, I can't remember what round, but they lost again this year. They were upset. And so I was following that, and then I ended up following a little bit of the College Cup and, the Cinderella story, right? I mean, the championship, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, you guys have had your wins, right? I mean, I know you're just
right. And from what I understand, and don't quote me on this, I believe I saw where we're returning either 8 or 9 of the 11 starters or something like that. So, knock on wood.
There's a lot of things I worry about at night. I'm not worried about them being good again.
I hear you.
The reason I actually, it was so high on my radar was that there's a journalist, a TV journalist here in Columbus. I think he's a sports journalist who is an alum of. Wait, who won? Marshall? No. Yeah.
Yes, Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah, Marshall. Yeah, he's an alum of Marshall, and so he was posting incessantly, like leading up to the game and after the game, and his wife was telling him he couldn't buy more gear, and he was buying more gear, and so he was like commentating the whole weekend or activities of the Cup.
Yeah, I don't. So you said you did not watch any of the final.
I did not.
Okay, I did. I'm not. I don't know soccer well enough to know all the strategy and whatnot. But I will say Marshall came out and played very aggressively, and I think that was certainly part of their plan, and it clearly worked. I think, and I think again I could be misspeaking here, but I think one of Indiana's Achilles' heels was their defense. Phenomenal goalie, but it looked like they struggled a little bit on the defensive side, and it showed a little bit in that game. But it is what it is. Came down to a one goal, and towards the latter 5 minutes, I think, or no. Did we go to overtime?
Yeah.
We went to
overtime. Yeah. Yep.
As long as it didn't end on PKs. That's the one thing I can't stand the games that end on PKs. And as a soccer player, you probably hate that too, because just
my daughter's game ended yesterday on penalty kicks. It was really just an internal like scrimmage of sorts, but it's heartbreaking. I mean, you see these 7, 8, 9-year-old kids. Like, I mean, it's pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, how's the fam?
Everybody's good. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Congratulations on 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything's good. My look, the pandemic has been, to watch it through the eyes of our kids has been sort of wild. I mean, kids are so resilient, but yet that you think about like percentage wise, like my son who turns 8 next month and our daughter, like it's been almost a quarter of his life.
Yeah.
Like in a weird way, think about like how the percentage of time but the silver lining, and again, I'm an optimist. I try to find silver linings. The main silver lining for our family is like, it's been a year and a half of having dinner every night together and, tucking the kids in every night. And as you know, with the work that we do, you're out a lot. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of fundraisers. There's a lot of things. And I love that. I mean, I love being out and meeting people and being in the community. But for the last year, been home. And I never thought I would just sort of say this, but it's been incredible time with the family.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And after 10 years, did Amy get any sort of like medal or anything special, or it's just no? You just get to spend more time with me over the next 9 months.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that she might take some trips on her own now. No, just kidding. No, it's been awesome. I mean, I'm very lucky to have an incredible spouse and partner who's supportive and kids who are awesome. I mean, one day right before the pandemic, I was leaving town. I was driving to the airport and I was leaving the house in the morning and my daughter was having breakfast. And she said to me, Dad, I wish you didn't have to travel for work today. And I sort of was like feeling really sad. And then she paused and then she said, but the work you do is so important. I want you to go and keep doing it.
Wow.
And it made me feel great. I mean, if our kids grow up focused on where they can put their energy to help more people, that would be the best win of all.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Do you by chance have that on video, do you?
I do not. I wish I did.
That would be classic.
I wish I did. Yeah, but I'll never forget that, going to the airport, flying to Phoenix for a speech, and I was like thinking about it the whole time. So it's been just interesting to watch the kids and see how they've dealt with everything. But complaints.
Right. I hear you. What would you say? I've asked this to a lot of different people who have had the experience that we've had. What would you say to a young individual who has received the same diagnosis, either one that you have had? What would you tell them today? What kind of resources would you offer to them?
It's a good question. I mean, I think a couple of thoughts. One, I always tell people to try to find things that they are in control of and continue to do those things. There's so much you're not in control of when somebody tells you you've got cancer and you have to rely on doctors and nurses and all sorts of professionals. But there are things, whether it's exercise or diet or, connecting with friends, like there are things that are in your control that can hopefully give you some sense of normalcy and keep some sense of normalcy. So that's one thing. The other is let people help. I think it's not human nature for any of us to ask for help. And all the time, I find myself even saying this, like, oh, let me know how I can help. Well, people typically don't call you back and say, hey, remember when you offered that? And so when people just show up at your door with food, or they show up and say, let's go for a walk or exercise or whatever it might be, like, let them help, because you probably need it and you probably wouldn't ask for it. And it's okay to be vulnerable and to sort of accept other people's help and support, even though it might feel unnatural. And then obviously from a medical standpoint, we always advise a second opinion. and even if you've got the best doctors in the world, just get it confirmed, because the peace of mind you will have when you start your treatment, knowing that this is the right path, you'll never second guess it. You'll never look back and say, I wish I should have done this or that. So the best second opinions in my mind confirm the first opinion. You're not looking for somebody to tell you something different. You're looking for them to say, oh, keep going, Yep. Because I think having confidence is important, and especially as you go down the treatment path.
Sure. So we talk a lot about attitude, and I know we've talked about this before, and there's been countless quotes and stories written on it. It's an easy thing for us to say, right? But what would you say to them about keeping a positive attitude, or just attitude in general?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I used to tell people all the time that, statistics mean nothing to the individual. So somebody tells you have a 25% chance of survival, somebody will look at that and go, well, that's terrible. Another person will look at that and go, oh, I'm going to be in the 25. And it doesn't mean anything to the individual, because it doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know if you're fit or what your attitude is or your support system or anything. And so if you can control your attitude and keep it positive, like, that's just another check in your column, like, it's not going to hurt you at all.
Right.
And, I think that goes for life in general, way beyond cancer. It's like, I was saying to somebody yesterday, I sort of joke with them, I'd rather be an optimist and be wrong than a pessimist and be right. Yeah. To walk around, all the time, like, being negative would be miserable. And especially when you're facing a cancer diagnosis. So I think there's a lot to be said for that, whether it actually impacts your physical well-being. I think it probably does, but psychologically, I don't see the downside. It doesn't mean you can't have days when you're upset and days when you're down and, sort of emotional or feeling negative. But on the whole, being optimistic about the path forward, the treatment plan, the medical team, your support system, putting all that in place and feeling confident and positive is really critical in my mind.
Yep. No, 100% agree with that one. All right. Well, parting words of wisdom for the audience of the Summits podcast.
Well, first, thanks for the opportunity and thanks for what you do through the Heroes Foundation and beyond. My parting words are just that, we've all learned through the pandemic how hard it is to be isolated and how hard it is to be away from people, and how we need desperately to be in community, and whether that's neighborhood, work community, educational community, sports community, whatever, organizational community. And I would just encourage people to get involved and do something to impact the world around them. If we all do one or two things that are significant, the world will be a much better place. And hopefully we can bring people together in powerful ways to do things that no one can do on their own. And that's really the goal of Pelotonia. None of us can cure cancer, but if we get thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people together, we can have a much bigger impact than any of us could have on our own.
Yep. Well said. I agree. Well, we thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Sorry, it's via remote, but it's such as life these days. And then on that note, just know that first tee is wide open, and there's a shrimp cocktail waiting if you just get your ass over here.
I can't wait. Listen, I will be there. And the reason I couldn't come today is because I've got to go to the driving range after this and practice. So I just figured, I'm just kidding. Listen, if Phil can do it at 50, then it's possible. I could possibly.
You're saying there's a chance.
You're saying there's a chance. Exactly. I will be there for sure.
Awesome. All right, Douglas. Thank you, sir.
Thanks
Appreciate it
so much.